My name is Douglas Pryor. This is a face study. It's just an educational resource. It's mostly a slideshow, but I'm just going to go through this method to make a face sculpture. I have a lot of workshops and classes on this subject, and I wanted to throw this out there in case people can't attend or can't manage to get out to those. They'll at least have a window into some of my method. So we've already started to get through into some of the sinking and raising, so creating a gentle dish into the metal. We already have an inch or two of depth here in the center. So the point of this is just to get the metal out. You need the metal as soft as possible and as prepared as possible for the nose. It is our farthest point, and it'll sneak up on you. To avoid tears and cracks in the material, we start raising. So we flip from dishing or sinking to raising. So I'm just using a 2-inch ball stake, and I'm using a cross peen to kind of hammer out and around from those noses. This is a pretty gentle process, and I am working the steel hot. This is 2.5 millimeter steel, or about 12 gauge steel. So there's a lot of metal to work with, but you still need to be careful. So the face structure now looks kind of like a T from the eyebrows to the nose. So you can kind of see how I'm distinguishing the different planes and heights of these. Whenever I make these, I'm making a few at a time. The fire is going to be on, so I might as well have a few irons in the fire. Now I've started to stretch and raise the areas for the mustache. This is going to be a face with a mustache, a very masculine, kind of rigid, bony face. And there it's drawn on. This method is constantly going back and forth between hammer work and drawing everything back on, and hammer work and drawing it all back on. And again, up until about this point, I am still working everything hot with only doing some cold work just to kind of fine tune. And you can tell what's cold work because the metal is going to look a lot more reflective and a lot shinier. So just be careful as you make the nose. You're going to walk it back. So now we've melted pitch into the face and then plopped the face down onto a pitch tray. Pitch is a pine resin. It's a very effective, very sticky medium to hammer against. It creates your backing for the metal so that it doesn't cave in, and so it only stretches where you want it to stretch. I'm using a pretty sharp, straight liner. Not too sharp. It's dull, but it's still pretty aggressive to cut into the steel. And I'm mapping out the line work where there are hard lines. In face sculptures like this, there's not a lot of hard lines until you're almost done, but the eyes, after I push in the tear ducts and around the nose with larger embossing tools, I can start to use liners. And that's when you start to map out your eyes and your eyelids. Wrinkles I'm probably going to save to the very end. And there's a lot of large embossing tools, the chisels that you can see in the background occasionally, prepping the face for all this work. So we just popped it out of the pitch. Now it's going back into the forge. The reason being is pushing down around that mustache to create that structure has flattened out some of the metal in the surrounding area. So in the forge, this gives me a chance to anneal, but it also lets me forge down the chin. So I had the chin kind of prepped, but you can tell from all the other previous photos that the steel is pretty flat going into the chin. So jumping into forge work, it's going to be pretty helpful to knock that complex structure down pretty evenly. So that was just a quick turnaround so that people can see the different shadows and volume. It's very difficult to see sculpture sometimes from just 2D, so I like to have like rotating lights so that you can actually see the differences in plane and value. Hair is part of the really, really fun part for me. It's some more of the tedious parts of this, but it's really nice to do, and it brings a lot of life to your work very quickly. So drawing it on, using straight and curved liners, mapping it out, I'm breaking down, there it is right there. You can see the different groupings, okay? So you put lines in, you planish around them, then you break down those segments again and again and again. I went back to kind of redefine underneath the mustache before we start chasing down the mustache, picking out the major groups in the mustache for the biggest groupings of hair. This is kind of a simple twist. I was looking at a lot of different face references for this. Um, but some Middle Eastern men with really big mustaches and very, very stark features. I thought it was very attractive. But I was jumping back and forth between some marble statues as well. So this isn't exactly one person, which is really forgiving because you don't have to worry about getting anything strictly wrong. So I'll keep challenging myself and pick out more accurate faces down the road. But I'm still pretty happy with how this came out. So now you can see how I'm still breaking down those structures further. We planished around our deep embossed lines for the larger segments of the hair structures. And then we're going and drawing it on in between all those little nooks and crannies. So it's layering. You're layering pass after pass after pass. And this is the real strength in chisel work, is that you have the time. You have just the thousands of overlapping pieces of information, the different chisel marks that you create. And it develops just such a unique structure and so much texture. So a mistake that is easy to make is to polish your work to a mere finish. This has never really been a preference of mine. Some pieces it works really well, but I love some chunkier marks in there just because it's going to catch and reflect the light. It's going to do a lot more for your sculpture, especially when it's a one-to-one face sculpture like this. So now we're pretty much close. I've removed a lot of the pitch to have access around the face, because as you can see here, I did add a little stubble for the chin, but this is it pretty much finished. I just signed the inside and it was ready to go. Thanks very much for watching. I hope this was helpful. I'm going to add a bunch of stuff in the video description, so if you have questions about material science or tool making or pitch, let me know. It's down there. Thanks very much.